Hi, enjoy listening. Madeline Carter always tried to keep her head down at college. Her clothes were never flashy, usually just clean jeans and simple sweaters, sometimes patched at the elbows. But her grades spoke louder than anything she wore. Professors loved to single her out as an example, pointing out how hard work could compete with money and privilege. Her classmates, especially the wealthy ones, resented her for it. None more so than Ryan Mitchell. Ryan's family practically owned half the city, and he strutted through campus with the kind of entitlement that made Maddie's skin crawl. His girlfriend, Claire Jennings, was just as bad. Always immaculately dressed, dripping with expensive jewelry, ready with a cutting remark about anyone who wasn't on her level. That's why Maddie was shocked when Tiffany Moore, a girl she barely knew, cornered her after class. "You know," Tiffany said, twirling a strand of bleached hair around her finger, "you should totally come to Ryan's birthday party this Friday. Everyone's going to be there." Maddie blinked. "Me? Why?" Tiffany giggled nervously. "Well, Ethan said he thought you were interesting. And Claire says you need to, get out more. It's going to be at Belmont's, the new place downtown." Super classy. Maddie's stomach dropped. Belmont's wasn't just any restaurant. It was the kind of place where she had once stopped outside just to look through the windows at the chandeliers and silk curtains. A place where cocktails cost more than what she earned in a day of cleaning stairwells. She shook her head. "That's really not my scene." "Oh, come on," Tiffany pressed. "You can't hide in the library forever. Live a little. Besides, Ryan wants the whole class there. It'd be weird if you didn't show up." The way she said it made Maddie uneasy, like there was a joke she wasn't in on. But she felt cornered. Refusing outright would just give them more reasons to talk about her. "I'll think about it," she said carefully. That night, Maddie dragged her mop bucket across the tiled lobby of her building. The smell of cleaning solution clung to her hands, and her back ached from hours of scrubbing. She hated that this was her life. College during the day, cleaning shifts in the evening, and a mother at home depending on her paycheck. She was so lost in thought, she didn't notice the elevator doors opening until someone spoke. "Need a hand with that?" She looked up to see Daniel Hayes, the new tenant on the 6th floor. He was tall, casually dressed in a button-down and slacks, his sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, but approachable, not like the polished elites she saw on campus. Maddie flushed. "No, I've got it. Thanks." Dan smiled slightly. "At least let me buy you something for all the hard work you do." It's easy to take clean hallways for granted. He reached into a bag he was carrying and pulled out a bakery box. "Here, it's just a chocolate cake. Nothing fancy." Maddie hesitated, then accepted it, her fingers brushing against his. "Thank you," she murmured, feeling both touched and strangely invisible at the same time. Did he only see her as the cleaning girl? Later that night, she sat at the tiny kitchen table with her mother, dividing slices of the cake. Lydia's face lit up, as if it were a feast. Maddie tried to smile too, but her thoughts kept circling back to Tiffany's invitation, to Belmont's glittering chandeliers, to the sneering laugh she imagined from Ryan and Claire. She knew something wasn't right, but against her better judgment, she also knew she wasn't ready to back down. The next day at school, Maddie felt the stares before she even sat down. Ryan Mitchell leaned casually against the wall outside the lecture hall, arms crossed, that smug grin plastered across his face. Claire stood beside him, scrolling through her phone, tossing her sleek hair like she knew everyone was watching. "Maddie Carter," Ryan drawled, as she approached. "Word is, you're coming to my party." Maddie froze. I haven't decided yet." "Oh, you'll come." His grin widened. "It wouldn't be the same without our star student." Claire glanced up from her phone, her eyes sharp. "Yeah, it'll be fun. Don't stress about what to wear. Just don't come in one of those thrift store sweaters." Her tone was sweet, but the barb landed. Maddie's cheeks flamed. She wanted to snap back, but instead she hurried into the classroom, clutching her notebook like a shield. Professor Scott began the lecture, and as always, he singled Maddie out with praise for her essay. She nodded politely, but her stomach churned. The more he praised her, the more Ryan's friends snickered behind her back. By the end of class, she was drained. Tiffany caught up with her in the hallway, bubbling with fake enthusiasm. "So, what are you going to wear Friday? It's like super formal. You don't want to look out of place." "I'm not sure I'll even go," Maddie muttered. Tiffany pouted. "Don't say that. Ethan will be so disappointed." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "And between you and me, Claire doesn't like it when Ryan talks about you. So you should totally come and show them you can fit in." Maddie wasn't stupid. She could see right through it. This wasn't an invitation. It was a setup. Still, part of her, stubborn, weary from always being the outsider, didn't want to give them the satisfaction of watching her hide. That evening, when she returned to her cleaning job, she found Dan unlocking his apartment door. "Rough day?" he asked, noticing her tired expression. "You could say that," she admitted, setting down her mop. "I think some people are planning a joke at my expense." Dan raised an eyebrow. "What kind of joke?" Maddie hesitated, then told him about the party, the snide remarks, the feeling that she was being lured into a trap. She hadn't meant to open up, but his steady gaze made her feel like she could. When she finished, Dan leaned against the wall thoughtfully. "So let me get this straight. They're hoping you'll walk into this fancy place looking uncomfortable, so they can laugh at you?" "Pretty much," Maddie sighed. He crossed his arms. "Then don't give them that satisfaction. Go. But go on your own terms. Let them choke on their expectations." Maddie let out a bitter laugh. "Easy for you to say. I can't exactly afford a designer dress. Good thing you know someone who owes you a favor." She frowned. "What do you mean?" Dan smiled faintly. "I'm not just a tenant here. I manage a few businesses downtown. One of them happens to be a restaurant with some connections to a stylist friend. Let me make a call." Maddie blinked at him, stunned. "Why would you do that?" "Because," he said simply, "I hate bullies. And you deserve better than to be their punchline." For the first time in weeks, Maddie felt something stir inside her. A flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to face this humiliation alone. Maddie almost regretted telling Dan about the party. It wasn't like her to lean on someone she barely knew, and part of her felt embarrassed at the idea of accepting his help. But by the next afternoon, when he texted her a simple message, "Meet me at Belmont's at 4," Curiosity outweighed hesitation. Belmont's was intimidating, even from the sidewalk. The polished windows, the valet in a crisp suit, the faint clink of crystal glasses inside. It was a world she didn't belong to. Maddie smoothed down her faded jacket, wishing she could disappear. Then Dan appeared, waving her over. He wasn't in a suit, just a navy sweater and dark jeans. But he carried himself with an ease that seemed to command respect. "I thought this was your friend's party venue," Maddie said nervously. "It is," Dan replied, "but it's also mine. Belmont's is one of the restaurants I own." Her mouth dropped open. "You own this place?" He chuckled. "Technically, yes, which means I can bend a few rules. Come on." Inside, the staff greeted him with warmth and familiarity. Maddie felt the curious eyes on her as he led her to a quiet corner table. Moments later, a tall woman with short platinum hair arrived, carrying a garment bag. "This is Melissa," Dan introduced. "Best stylist in the city. She owes me a favor or two." Marissa gave Maddie a quick but thorough once-over, then smiled. "Oh, she's going to be stunning. You've been hiding under those sweaters, haven't you?" Maddie flushed. "I don't have much choice." "Well, that changes now," Marissa said firmly. "You're coming to my studio tomorrow. We'll get you fitted." Maddie wanted to protest, but Dan held up a hand. "No arguments. You told me yourself you're tired of being their target. Let's turn the tables." Back on campus the next day, rumors about Ryan's party buzzed in the air. Tiffany cornered Maddie again, gushing about how exclusive the guest list was and how Ryan had reserved the most expensive champagne. Maddie kept her answers vague, almost enjoying Tiffany's growing frustration at not getting a straight yes or no. Meanwhile, Ryan and Claire were already plotting. "She's going to show up in some cheap dress," Claire sneered while flipping through her phone. "Can you imagine? At Belmont's, everyone will see she doesn't belong." Ryan smirked. "Exactly the point. And once she makes a fool of herself, maybe she'll finally learn her place." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, but didn't argue. He never did. That evening, Maddie sat on the edge of her bed, but home, watching her mother fold laundry. Lydia hummed softly, unaware of the storm her daughter was walking into. "Mom," Maddie said suddenly, "do you think people like us ever get taken seriously? In their world, I mean." Lydia paused, looking at her daughter with weary but gentle eyes. "Sweetheart, people with money will always think they're better, but that doesn't mean they are. What matters is how you carry yourself. You've got more dignity in your little finger than those kids will ever have." Maddie swallowed hard, blinking back tears. Maybe dignity alone wouldn't silence Ryan and Claire, but with Dan's help, maybe, just maybe, she could make them choke on their own arrogance. And for the first time, she found herself looking forward to Friday night. By Friday afternoon, the buzz around campus was impossible to ignore. Ryan Mitchell's birthday party was the event of the semester. Students whispered about it in the hallways, speculating about the guest list, the food, the music, and most importantly, who would show up wearing what. Maddie pretended not to care. She kept her head low, focused on her notes, though her heart pounded every time she overheard Claire's sharp laugh echoing from across the room. "Bet she won't even come," Claire said loudly as Maddie packed up her books. She probably doesn't even own a dress. Maybe she'll bring her mop as a +1, Ryan added, and the group erupted in laughter. Maddie's cheeks burned, but she forced herself to walk calmly out of the classroom. If they wanted to laugh, let them. Tonight, she would give them something else entirely. Meanwhile, Ryan and Claire's group huddled at Belmont's hours before the party. Claire leaned across the polished table, whispering to the waiter she had slipped a 20. "Remember," she instructed, "as soon as that girl sits down, bring out the oysters and escargot. Then the caviar service. Let's see if she even knows which fork to use." Ryan smirked. This is going to be priceless. Ethan shifted in his seat, glancing away. "Maybe you're overdoing it. I mean, she hasn't really done anything to you." Claire shot him a glare. "Oh, don't start. She walks around like she's better than everyone, just because Professor Scott loves her essays. She needs a reality check." Ryan clapped Ethan on the back, brushing off the hesitation. "Relax, man. It's just a little fun. You'll see." That evening, Belmont's gleamed under golden light, cars pulling up one after another. Maddie's stomach twisted as she stood with Dan outside his sleek black sedan. She could hear the hum of conversation from inside, the clink of glasses, the polite laughter of moneyed families. "You ready?" Dan asked quietly. "No," Maddie admitted honestly. He smiled. "Good, that means you care. Now, let's go remind them that money doesn't buy class." The valet opened the door, and Maddie stepped out. For a moment, the cold night air bit her cheeks, and she felt exposed. Then she heard the hush that fell over the crowd gathered outside. Her dress shimmered under the lights, elegant but not gaudy, the fabric hugging her figure with effortless grace. Her hair, styled in soft waves, caught the glow of the chandeliers spilling from Belmont's windows. She looked nothing like the girl in patched sweaters they were used to mocking. Ryan's smirk faltered. Claire's eyes widened before narrowing into a glare. Tiffany nearly dropped her clutch. Maddie held her head high, clutching a small gift bag for Ryan. Dan walked at her side, calm and confident, as if he had every right to be there, which, Maddie realized, he did. "Happy birthday, Ryan," she said evenly, handing him the bag. Inside was a rare vinyl record Maddie had found months ago at a thrift store for almost nothing. Something she knew Ryan had been hunting for. His eyes widened as he pulled it out, stunned. For once, he was speechless. Maddie allowed herself the smallest of smiles. The trap was set, but not for her. The dining hall at Belmont's glittered with candlelight, the clinking of glasses, and the low hum of conversation. Waiters in black suits glided between the tables, carrying trays that looked like they belonged in a royal court. Maddie followed Dan to their seats. She could feel eyes on her. The shock hadn't worn off yet. Whispers followed her movements, and though her cheeks heated, she forced herself to keep her back straight, her chin lifted. Across the table, Claire whispered something to Ryan, who smirked again, confidence returning. "So glad you could make it, Maddie," he drawled. "I was worried you might be out of your element." "Thanks for the invitation," Maddie said evenly, unfolding her napkin. "It's a beautiful place. Only the best Claire chimed in, her smile sugar-sweet. I'm sure it's a nice change from, well, wherever you usually go. Dan's eyes flicked toward Claire, cool and unimpressed. Maddie didn't need to look at him to feel the reassurance. Moments later, the waiter appeared, setting down plates of oysters with silver forks arranged in precise order. Maddie could practically hear Claire's inner cackle. Instead of fumbling, Maddie reached calmly for the correct fork, squeezing lemon over the shell with practiced ease. She'd never eaten oysters before in her life, but last night Dan had sat with her in Belmont's kitchen, showing her each course, each utensil, each little ritual. Delicious, she said after her first bite, setting the fork neatly aside. Claire's smile faltered. Ryan blinked. Ethan raised his brows in surprise. The next course, escargot, was brought out, gleaming in its porcelain dish. Ryan leaned forward, smirking again. Careful, Maddie, don't drop it. Maddie picked up the snail toms gracefully, slipping one into the small fork, and popped it into her mouth without hesitation. Garlic butter. Not bad. Across the table, Tiffany stared like she was watching a magician pull rabbits from a hat. Dan hid a smile behind his glass. Course after course, Maddie kept pace. She wasn't flashy, didn't show off, just quiet competence, as though she belonged there all along. With every dish, the silence and Ryan's end of the table grew heavier, the laughter weaker. Finally, the waiter presented the caviar service, Claire's last card. Maddie scooped a small portion onto a blini, paired it with sour cream, and ate it as if she'd been doing it her whole life. Then she turned to Ryan, smiling politely. Everything is wonderful, Ryan. You really know how to host. For once, Ryan had no witty comeback. Dan leaned closer, his voice low enough for only Maddie to hear. They were waiting for you to fall apart. Instead, you're teaching them manners. Maddie let out a slow breath. The tension in her chest eased, and a spark of triumph lit in her eyes. For the first time all evening, she wasn't surviving. She was winning. The dinner dragged on, and though the food was exquisite, the tension at the table was thick enough to slice with a knife. Maddie could feel Ryan's frustration simmering, his jaw tightening every time she smiled or handled a dish with ease. Claire's painted nails tapped against her champagne glass, her eyes sharp and narrowed. She hadn't expected Maddie to survive the first course, let alone glide through the entire evening like she was born to it. So, Maddie, Claire finally said, her voice sugary but tight. What do your parents do? I'm sure they must be proud of you. Maddie felt her stomach knot. She thought of her mother, folding laundry in their cramped apartment, living on disability checks. But she refused to let shame creep in. She lifted her chin. My mum's the strongest person I know. She raised me on her own. And yeah, she's proud. There was no apology in her tone, no attempt to hide. For a moment, Claire faltered, her smile freezing before she looked down at her glass. Ethan cleared his throat. That's actually pretty admirable, he said softly. Ryan shot him a glare, but Ethan didn't retract the words. Dan rested a hand lightly on the table, just close enough for Maddie to notice. Some people earn their place, he said casually, and others buy it. I know which I respect more. Ryan's mouth twisted. Funny. Respect doesn't keep the lights on. No, Dan agreed, his eyes steady. But it keeps your name clean. For a beat, silence stretched across the table. Maddie's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral, sipping water like nothing had happened. After dinner, the group spilled into the lounge where music played and drinks flowed freely. Most of the students mingled, laughing too loudly, showing off their expensive clothes. Maddie stuck close to Dan, though she could feel the jealous stares burning into her back. "Who is he?" Tiffany whispered to Claire, not nearly as quietly as she thought. "He's, really good-looking. Is he rich?" Claire clenched her jaw. "He's no one. Probably just some guy she conned into bringing her." But the uncertainty in her voice betrayed her. She hadn't expected Maddie to show up with someone like Dan, a man who carried himself with more confidence than Ryan ever could. Later, Dan suggested they step outside for air. Maddie followed him through the glass doors onto the terrace, where the city lights stretched like stars below. "You were incredible tonight," he said quietly. Maddie laughed under her breath. "I felt like I was walking on a tightrope." "And you never slipped," he said, smiling. Then his expression softened. "You know, you don't have to let them define you. You're more than enough, Maddie. More than they'll ever admit." She turned to face him, startled by the warmth in his voice. For a second, she couldn't find her words. Then she just whispered, "Thank you." The terrace door creaked open. Claire appeared, her heels clicking against the stone. "There you are," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet. Her eyes flicked between Maddie and Dan, cold and sharp. "Maddie, why don't you run along inside? I need a word with your friend." Maddie froze. Dan's expression hardened. The battle wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The terrace was cooler than inside, the night air sharp with the scent of the city. Maddie's pulse jumped, but she didn't move. She wasn't about to leave Dan alone with Claire. Claire's smile was practiced, but her eyes glinted with calculation. "You've made quite the entrance tonight, Maddie. Almost believable." Maddie crossed her arms. "Almost?" "Come on." Claire's tone dripped with condescension. "You don't belong here, and we all know it. But I'll give you this. You put on a good show." She shifted her gaze to Dan, her lashes fluttering just a little. "And you don't have to waste your time babysitting. You're far too polished to be tangled up in her mess." Maddie felt the words like a slap, but before she could react, Dan stepped forward. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "Claire," he said evenly, "you mistake cruelty for sophistication. That's why Maddie shines brighter than you ever will." Claire's smile faltered. Her face flushed, though she tried to cover it with a laugh. "Oh, please, you don't even know her." "I know enough," Dan said, his gaze steady. "I know she doesn't tear people down to feel important. That's more than I can say for this crowd." Maddie's chest tightened. No one had ever stood up for her like that. Not in front of Claire, not in front of anyone. For once, Claire had no quick comeback. Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. The silence stretched awkwardly before she tossed her hair and muttered, "Enjoy your little fantasy." With that, she stalked back inside, her heels clattering against the floor. Maddie let out the breath she'd been holding. "You didn't have to do that." Her throat tightened, emotions tumbling too fast for her to catch. She wanted to laugh, to cry, to tell him she'd never felt so seen. Instead, she managed a shaky smile. "Guess I should thank you again for being my fake date." Dan's lips curved into a grin, softer this time. "Funny thing," he said, leaning a little closer. "It doesn't feel fake anymore." Maddie's heart skipped. The city lights blurred for a moment as she blinked. Something was shifting. Something real. Something she hadn't expected. But before either of them could speak again, the lounge doors burst open. Ryan stumbled out, a drink in hand, eyes burning with jealousy. "There you are," he sneered. "Thought you'd sneak off, Maddie, with him?" Maddie stiffened, but Dan stepped between them, his voice low and firm. "Go back inside, Ryan." Ryan's grip tightened on his glass. "Or what?" The air crackled with tension. Maddie realized this night wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about choosing who she wanted to be and who she wanted to stand with. Ryan's laugh was sharp, the kind that drew attention. A few students near the terrace doors turned their heads, sensing drama. Maddie's stomach twisted, but she forced herself not to shrink back. "Look at you, Maddie," Ryan sneered, slurring slightly. "Playing dress-up, pretending you're one of us." And dragging him along like some accessory. He jabbed a finger toward Dan. "You think that makes you special?" Maddie's chest burned. She remembered every time Ryan had humiliated her. His jokes in front of classmates, the smirks, the whispered insults that always landed like punches. And here he was, trying to do it again. But this time, she wasn't alone. "Enough," Dan said, sharply, stepping closer. His tone was so commanding that Ryan actually faltered. "You've had your fun at Maddie's expense, but it ends tonight." Ryan's face reddened. "Stay out of this. You don't know her." "I know she deserves respect," Dan shot back. The heat in Maddie's chest spread to her throat. She could feel everyone watching now. Claire, Ethan, Tiffany, the curious onlookers lingering at the doorway. The Maddie from a year ago would have frozen. The Maddie tonight wasn't going to. She stepped out from behind Dan. Her voice shook at first, but it grew steadier with each word. "You're right, Ryan. I don't belong in your world. I don't have money or a last name that gets me into country clubs. But you know what? I belong in mine. And I'd rather be honest about who I am than hide behind a fancy watch and Daddy's credit card." A ripple of murmurs spread through the group. Ethan coughed into his fist, trying to hide a grin. Ryan opened his mouth, but Maddie wasn't done. "You spent years making me feel small. Tonight, I realized I'm not the one who's small. You are. Because tearing other people down is the only way you feel big." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. For the first time, Ryan looked cornered, his arrogance cracking under the weight of the truth. He sputtered, but no clever comeback came. Dan's hand brushed against Maddie's, not grabbing, just steady, grounding. Finally, Ryan muttered something under his breath and stormed past the crowd, disappearing back into the lounge. The hush broke into low chatter, but Maddie barely heard it. Her heart was pounding, her hands trembling, but she felt lighter than she had in years. Dan leaned close, his voice quiet, meant only for her. That was incredible. Maddie let out a shaky laugh, wiping at her eyes. "I think I'm still shaking." "Good," Dan said softly, means it mattered. And in that moment, with the city lights stretching around them and the echoes of Ryan's defeat fading, Maddie realized something had shifted forever. She wasn't the girl who got humiliated at school anymore. She was the girl who stood her ground. And maybe, just maybe, the girl who had found someone who saw her worth. The gala carried on behind them, laughter and music muffled by the terrace doors, but Maddie didn't care. For the first time all night, she felt free. She and Dan slipped out through the lobby, ignoring the curious stares that followed. The cool night air greeted them, fresh and sharp, sweeping away the heavy perfume and polished pretenses of the ballroom. They walked in silence at first, their steps echoing against the pavement. Maddie clutched her small purse, still trembling from the confrontation. I can't believe I said all that, she admitted with a shaky laugh. My hands were shaking the whole time. Dan smiled at her, steady and warm. That's what courage looks like. You didn't let him own your story anymore. Maddie swallowed hard. His words landed deep, in a place still raw from years of being belittled. I always thought I had to prove something to them, she said softly. But tonight I realized I don't. You don't, Dan agreed. You only have to live for yourself. They stopped under a street lamp, the city glowing around them. Maddie looked up at him, her heart pounding for a very different reason now. I never expected any of this, she whispered. I just wanted a fake date to get through one night. Dan's lips curved, but his eyes stayed serious. And now? Maddie hesitated, then let the truth slip free. Now, I don't want it to be fake. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Dan reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. It was simple, steady, real. Good, he said quietly. Because neither do I. The noise of the city swirled around them. Cars, laughter, the hum of life. But Maddie felt a stillness settle inside her. She had faced the people who once defined her, stood her ground, and walked away stronger. And beside her was someone who saw her not as a punchline, not as a project, but as herself. As they walked down the street hand in hand, Maddie felt a quiet certainty bloom in her chest. This wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. If you like the story, I would be very happy to have your support. Click the thumbs up. And to not miss new stories, subscribe and click on the bell. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and all the best.